Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome back. If you just joined us, we are in the mid-morning talk. In the segment, we are joined by our one and only sister Sumayya Omar, who is originally from the Newcastle. She has her own events and catering business, and she's 31 years old. At this age, she's back into university, mashallah. She currently sits on the seat of Newcastle Muslim Women's Forum. She was the events coordinator for BDS South Africa during the time when the Palestinian boycott movement was alive. She is a qualified life coach and avid horse rider and a passionate cook, mashallah. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has mentioned that any action without the remembrance of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is either a deviation or heedlessness, except in four things: walking from a target to a target, that is archery, training a horse, playing with one's family, and learning how to swim. So, our sister Sumayya Umar will take us through the sports, inshallah. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome, sister.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran for having me on the show. Even though it's our last show, I am very sad. Not only sad that it's our last show, but, it is the last few days of Ramadan, and, on this last days, we always ask Allah to accept the work that has been done for us, to always use us for His deen, to make us amongst those that revive His message, and to make us amongst to gain His favor. And like I always been, when we mention Allah, then Allah will always mention us in a higher gathering, and we ask Allah to always mention us in this higher gathering.
Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ameen. That's so beautiful, dua. Jazakallah. So we'll go into it. Please share like a bit more light on the importance of Sunnah sports and importance of instilling Sunnah in our lives as well, inshallah.
Sister Fatima, it's always a pity that our time is, really limited with regards to talking about this. But when I was trying to understand the question, what is the importance? I think to know the importance is to understand our deen, and we need to begin there, and we need to know what is our role as Muslims. Secondly, we need to understand what is this dunya created for, and why our hearts are so attached to this dunya. This dunya was created by Allah, and in His regard, it is a very low, it is an earthly thing. It holds no purpose to Allah. The purpose of this dunya is a means to our end. The essence of our being is to attain Jannah, and instilling Sunnah and reviving the message and reviving the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Firstly, it gains pleasure with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. It gains us a place, a recognition next to Habibullah, in the court of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And Allah's Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, he says, and just give me a moment, know that whoever revives my tradition from my sunnah, if it has died out after me, will have a reward like those who act upon it without diminishing any other of their rewards. And Rasulullah also says that we should seek knowledge from the cradle to our grave. So, just in understanding why it is important to revive sunnah, or instilling this important, is an act of ibadah. And, surely anything done for Allah's purpose gains His pleasure. And secondly, this is a really important fact, and I mentioned it last week. We are living in a world, a very modern world, and the currency is popular and fame. Everybody understands fashions and trends, so why not make it amongst ourselves an important thing to revive the sunnah and make it fashionable amongst ourselves?
Ameen, inshallah. May Allah make it such. I always tell the students the same thing. We make everything trend. Why can't we make the sunnah trend? Why can't we make the hijab trend? Things like that. So I like what you said right now, that we should, inshallah, inculcate these sunnahs in our lives. Ameen. With that, how can we shift our attention from our youth, basically from enlightening their hearts towards deen instead of dunya?
Sister Fatima, in order to take action, we need the knowledge. And when we have the knowledge, we have the power, because knowledge is power.
Yes.
And this of aligning our heart and deen over dunya is a very vast conversation to have, and one could take their whole life finding answers. So I tried to simplify it for you, for the listeners, in my understanding to the best of my ability. And if we have to understand the two things, which is dunya, as I said, a temporary earthly world, a lower world, and the root word for dunya would mean to bring near. And then we ask ourselves, how do we bring near to this concept, which the concept of dunya, which Allah has created, given meaning to, and created us beings to be living in? Is it through the deen? And then we ask ourselves, what is the deen? And then we ask ourselves, then we further study what is the deen. And deen is derived from the root word of dana, which means to submit. And then we ask ourselves, how do we submit in dunya through our deen? So how do we use these two, deen and dunya, to submit? And this is by aligning our hearts and turning our hearts back to Allah. And just a very simple thing, in one narration, Aisha radiallahu anhu says that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to command the people to leave sins that were unlawful. They would have not, or they would have questioned it. But Allah Ta'ala revealed the first ayahs of Quran to remind the people of Jannah and Jahannam. And she says, because the attachment of the people's heart to sin was so, that is why Allah chose the first ayah of the Quran to remind us of Jannah and Nar. And this is really important, is that we need to turn our hearts back to Allah. And by turning our hearts and realigning our attention back to Allah, and we do this by reminding ourselves of Jannah and Jahannam, because we live in dunya, and this dunya only reminds us of everything everything worldly. There's nothing, it's all earthly. So there's nothing to remind us. So if we revive our heart, because our heart is the most important organ in our body. A functioning heart is a functioning body. And even through reviving our heart through the Sunnah sports, I mean, we spoke about it, the physical benefits, how it, produces feel-good hormones, endorphins. This, it pumps our hearts up, and it sends messages to our brains. So, subhanAllah, our deen is really, really amazing. Allah Ta'ala has made it such that anything that we do to gain His pleasure, will gain His favor, will make us better Muslims. And obviously we need to revive our hearts and turn our hearts back to Allah and recenter our focus back to Allah, and that is through always reminding ourselves of Jannah and Jahannam.
Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Yes, inshallah, reminding ourselves of Jannah and Jahannam, inshallah. Plus, it's the last 10 days, and that is where we ask for such. Allahumma inna as'aluka al-Jannah wa na'udhu bika minan nar, And then also, going back to the 3 weeks, a bit of recap in swimming, the swimming sports, the archery sport, and the horse riding, inshallah, and its importance, basically.
So, Abba Fatima, the importance, as I said, is to understand it. The revival of these Sunnah sports gains favor and pleasure. Swimming, archery, horsebacking has both physical, psychological, physiological benefits. Secondly, it is Sunnah sports which were encouraged by Rasulullah sallallahu. Rasulullah, for example, horse riding. Horses were not only a majestic animal created by Allah, but also loved horse riding. And when I was thinking and reflecting upon this, I feel like sometimes the freedom that we want in the world, we could find it through the backs of our horses, because horse riding could also be a window to our soul. If we want to attain closeness to Allah Ta'ala, then we shoot the arrow, because Allah Ta'ala says that the distance between the arrow and the target is a portion of Jannah. And really, if we want to escape the fitna and facade of this world, or we want to, understand that we are shaping our life, and really that's what we do. We are fashioning our life in a world towards these illusions of grandeurs. And reviving the Sunnah through the Sunnah sports is a reminder of our place in dunya, and it helps us gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always mentions, if you do a sunnah which is pleasing, then you gain favor, and this is the most important thing.
Definitely, it is. So imagine to something like that, something just physical, something that can also be just for pleasure. And as long as your intention is correct, that is for the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we gain the reward as well. Jazakallah so much for that. I feel like we need to definitely have other talks in terms of such, inshallah. Any advice to our listeners, inshallah?
Yes, no, so Fatima, to be honest, I started my academic career when I was 18 years old, and I ventured out into politics. And Alhamdulillah, I spent many years in the political field, and then I stopped studying. And for the last 10 years, I really, it was a big struggle. And this is why we spoke about it earlier, and why I place a lot of emphasis on youth. And if youth are struggling, and to find purpose, is firstly to understand our deen. And what I realize is, when we give up a portion of this dunya for akhirah, that is when we start finding our understanding and our purpose. And after 10 years, I went back to university, and I finally, found the purpose. And this is why I'm pursuing my career in Islam and politics, and merging the two. And, as much as I would like to give advice, I could give guidelines to my best ability. And, as I mentioned, Allah Ta'ala must always make us of use to revive His message, because we are living in a world where Islam is maybe the worst at the moment, but it is the most popular currency. To be Muslim is to be a fashion these days. We can see what is going on in Palestine. We can see what is going on in the Middle East. And this is a constant reminder of our deen. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always used to make this dua. He used to ask Allah, "O changer of the heart, make my heart firm upon your religion." So, my dear listeners, always hold tight to the rope of Allah. Allah says, even if there's one soul in this dunya that has iman, then I will sustain everything on this earth. So iman is so important. Reviving the message is so important. Turning your hearts back to Allah, because Aisha radiallahu anhu says that if the first ayah were revealed for us to do what was lawful, then we would not have done it, because our hearts are attached to this world. And unfortunately, this is how it is. But if we remember Allah, and we remember that this world is created nothing for Allah, it has no meaning or purpose, and that our final destination, the essence of our being, is al-akhirah, because we live there for eternity. So there's so much for us youth to understand, and the quicker we gain this understanding as to our purpose as youth, and when we are struggling, we need to know that we feel abandoned, the doors of Allah were never closed. And this is the most importantly, Allah never closes His doors, even when we feel abandoned. And then secondly, we need to remind ourselves that when Allah talks about afterlife, and know that it is important, because the Quran and Sunnah were sent as guidelines to mankind on this dunya to reach the afterlife. But Allah talks about, before reaching the afterlife, He talks about the day of reckoning. But when He talks about this day of reckoning, He doesn't say that it's a pleasurable day. He says, he refers it to the day of torment. It's a day of reckoning. It's a day of terror. I mean, he says to us that there are some prophets who have no followers. And if you really have to understand this, I mean, they were the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were sent as messengers, and some of them stand before Allah with no followers. And then we have to place ourselves and think of ourselves as being the last of the ummah. We were granted Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whose name was written on the throne of Allah. I know, Musa alayhi salam used to always question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, Allah, you know what? It was so important. Make me amongst the ummah of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So firstly, being a Muslim, is very important. We need to acknowledge our status and we need to honor the status. As youth, we need to, as I mentioned, align our hearts back to Allah. And there are many ways to do this. Secondly, the revival of Sunnah sports, I was also thinking about it, is that as parents, we need to make more effort and we need to ask our madrasas, not only the Islamic institutions, but also why do our madrasas or Islamic, afternoon madrasas only just focus on the knowledge? Why aren't we doing more, making more effort on instilling this Sunnah sports? Reviving the messages, making it more interactive for our students. I mean, I know when I went to madrasa, I was not aware of any of these Sunnah sports. Really,
Mm.
we need to really make more effort in madrasas, in our schools, to revive the message through inculcating these Sunnah sports, even if it's doing one, such as archery, and not and starting the knowledge from there, and then putting it in the of our schools and our madrasas. I think that would be an important starting point to revive the message.
Ameen, inshallah. Ameen. May Allah accept and may Allah make it such that we inculcate all of these into our lives and our children's lives. And like you said, mentioned in terms of madrasas, that we should bring about such spots into the children's lives as well. I like the fact that you mentioned that in order for us to find our purpose, we need to understand our deen. And in order to us understand our deen, we need to give up dunya, and then we will gain versus deen, and Allah Ta'ala will never lose, rather Allah Ta'ala's doors are never closed. So may Allah Ta'ala make it easy for all of us, and may Allah Ta'ala make it such that we try our best to inculcate all types of sunnah, inshallah, into our lives in order for us to gain akhirah as well. Like you said, that Nabi Sallallahu has such a big follow and we always looking for things to follow everywhere, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere. This is what we should be following. Like you said, make it fashionable, inshallah. Ameen. Jazakallah khairan so much. May
Ameen.
Allah Ta'ala reward you. May Allah grant you the best of dunya and akhirah. And may Allah
Ameen.
Ta'ala make it such that the sunnah spots be revived around the world. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen.
And inshallah, Mr. Fatima, with Salam Media, now that we have opened the conversation and topic, that we can launch a campaign in South Africa, start
Ameen.
small in the smaller towns, and obviously in the cities. We know that Al Falah and Kurtuba are going, and we really make efforts through this
Ameen.
platform because the intention has been set. And yes, and we ensure that our madrasas take towards the syllabus, and that's what we have to. We always have to aim to achieve goodness for our youth,
Ameen.
and
Inshallah.
and it is our youth who are going to be the flag bearers of Islam. Secondly, we see
Definitely.
and we see this in Palestine, and we see this all over the world. Those that are making bigger sacrifice in the world at the moment is the youth that are at the forefront of the war. And what's important is that Allah will ask us, but what did you do?
Hmm. That is such a
And
scary
Allah will
question,
say
right?
to us, you know, how how did you do it?
Mm.
And where did you do it from? So that is why as youth, we need to align our focus and turn our hearts back to Allah. We've got
Ameen.
to find
Inshallah.
a purpose for ourselves in Islam, and we find the purpose first through our understanding of our deen. And it is not only this, it's not only basics. Deen is not basics. It's not just in
Mm.
Quran. It's not just. There's so much more to our deen, and it is so beautiful. But we've got to make it fashionable again. And inshallah, with this intention of reviving the Sunnah sports, bring our youth back onto the path of Islam and making it fashionable and popular.
Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Jazakallah so much. May Allah Ta'ala reward you. And hopefully, inshallah, this will happen. It's gonna
Ameen.
happen, inshallah. Ameen. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam and Eid Mubarak to all our followers.
Ameen.
A future
Jazakallah.
Eid Mubarak. All right. Salams.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah.